Will hear the appeal in the Oscar Pistorius case tomorrow. Just more than 10 days after being released from prison under correctional supervision, the state will be appealing the athlete's culpable homicide conviction, arguing that he should have been found guilty of murder. For more on this, we cross now live to our reporter, Manqoba Mchunu, who is in our Bloemfontein studios. Manqoba, good afternoon to you. So very different to what we saw at the High Court throughout the trial proceedings. What we're seeing now with this appeals case, what's the motive behind the state's appeal?
Well, certainly, Natasha, this is a crucial matter for Oscar Pistorius, as it will decide whether or not he stays at home or he goes back to jail. And basically what the state wants is that Oscar Pistorius should be charged with murder, saying that the culpable homicide charge that he was given by the North Gauteng High Court is simply not enough. We've certainly heard State Prosecutor Gerrinal saying that that particular sentence and conviction was shockingly inappropriate, and therefore they're going to fight that the athlete faces the murder charge so that he can go back to jail and serve a lengthy jail time for killing River Steenkamp. We know, of course, that Oscar Pistorius has always maintained that he shot River Steenkamp thinking that she was an intruder, and that's the version he presented in court throughout the trial. And then we will recall that again, that the state had argued that, initially Oscar Pistorius should have been charged with premeditated murder, and his argument was basically that Oscar Pistorius meant to kill River Steenkamp on that fateful morning, and that he went to the toilet for the sole purpose of killing River Steenkamp following a heated argument. But then it was obvious during trial that the state was not going to succeed in proving that case of premeditated murder or murder with direct intent. It then opted for murder with indirect intent, which is known as dolus eventualis. And what basically the state is saying is that Oscar Pistorius foresaw that by shooting through a small toilet cubicle, he could kill the person behind it. And they believe that he armed himself for that sole purpose of shooting that person behind the door and possibly killing that person, but still went on ahead and fired the 4 shots. So their argument is that obviously the court did not make the right finding in this regard, because you'll recall that Judge Thokozile Masipa found that Oscar Pistorius should be charged with a lesser charge, or should be found guilty of a lesser charge of culpable homicide or negligent killing, and that is what the court found in the end, sentencing Oscar Pistorius to 5 years. But the state then says it believes that another court will come to a different conclusion, and says that Oscar Pistorius should serve a lengthy jail term or should face a harsher punishment for killing River Steenkamp. And that's where we are at this point. That's the argument that they're going to be bringing here at the Supreme Court of Appeal.
Well, then proceedings tomorrow, Manqoba, what will take place before the appeal is heard?
Well, Natasha, before the appeal is heard, there are certain issues that have to be clarified by the panel of judges at the Supreme Court of Appeal. The first issue being that question whether this appeal is a question of law or an issue of fact. We know that in South African law, issues of fact cannot be appealed. And what basically the Oscar Pistorius' lawyers are saying is that the state's case is not a question of law, but rather issues of fact that are disguised as questions of law, and they are arguing that the matter should therefore not proceed to be heard. But on the other hand, the state is saying that these are questions of law that question of dolus eventualis will have to be clarified by the court, and they believe this should go ahead. The court will have to make a ruling on that, and if indeed it finds that these are questions of or issues of facts that are being raised by the state in this matter, this appeal will therefore not continue as planned. Another issue that still needs to be clarified is whether or not the state does have a ground to go ahead with appeal on the basis that Oscar Pistorius was already convicted for killing River Steenkamp on a lesser charge of culpable homicide. What the state is saying is that basically Oscar Pistorius was acquitted of murder, and therefore they believe they have that right to appeal this matter before the Supreme Court of Appeal. But Oscar Pistorius' lawyers, on the other hand, are saying that Oscar Pistorius was convicted, even though on a lesser charge of culpable homicide, and therefore this issue should not be entertained by the court. And the court will have therefore to clarify whether indeed there are grounds grounds for either party or for the state to continue with its appeal on that basis that Oscar Pistorius has already been convicted of culpable homicide. But we do know for sure that a panel of 5 judges will hear this matter, and they are going to ultimately decide on the fate of Oscar Pistorius. The athlete himself is not expected to be in court, as he's still serving the remainder of his sentence at home under correctional supervision.
And that appeal being heard tomorrow. That was our reporter Manqoba Mchunu live from our Bloemfontein studios ahead of the state's appeal in the Oscar Pistorius case. Manqoba, thank you very much.